This is Visions Under Construction, a chance for our guests to share their visions and tell us what they're working on. For their continued support, we would like to thank Simwood, straight-talking, forward-thinking telecoms, simwood.com. Why not make CloudOnyx your communication partner? Go to cloudonyx.io. You can find everything about the VUC at vuc.me, thanks to Bluehost, and thanks also to zipdx.com, the conference bridge, and to voxphone.com for local rate dial-ins.
Okay, welcome, ladies and germs. We're going to have a really exciting last-minute thrown-together show tonight on our session. First of all, let's welcome back our recurring star, Jay Carpenter. Hey, Jay, unmute and say hello.
Hello, Randy, and all.
Good to see you. And this is Jay's one of Jay's ideas, but we have a show chock full of news. We're going to go to Jay, but before we do, I have to show you and mention this coming right up, folks. I hope this is the right screen. Yes, in just a few hours, there's going to be a total lunar eclipse, the longest of the century, believe it or not. Starts at about, I've given this in 20 different time zones, so I can't remember. Oh, if you're in the United States, forget it. You won't see it. You may see it in Western Europe, though. Those of us, yeah, poor Jay's in Arizona. That's not going to happen for you, buddy. We thought James might have seen it on his plane. Anyway, just look it up. July 2018, lunar eclipse. It's going to last 2.5 hours. It's cloudy here, so I can stop being a jerk about it. Okay. Next, stop presenting. We're going to move over to Jay. Jay, let's hear a little bit about the latest news from Desert Blockchain, and then later on, we're going to be talking about the main topic, which is the Distributed Web Summit. To you, Jay.
Cool. Thanks, Randy. So, as you might know, I've been in the telecom world for a long time, since the mid-90s. And basically, about 4 years ago, I saw this blockchain thing, and I realized that blockchain is a path that might be a solution to what the telecoms have been working on for a couple decades now in terms of naming, addressing, and numbering. So I started this desert blockchain community in Arizona, in Phoenix, to bring people together so we could all collaborate, work together, create some things, and now we've got almost 1,500 members. And we do basically a set of events where we meet once a month and we talk about different topics, kind of like just a general session. We're also having something called blockathons.
We're now unmuted.
Arizona blockathons. And that's like a hackathon, only we're using the blockchain construct and various constructs there to create things. So we've had a lot of talk about blockchain and how wonderful it is and blah, blah, blah. But now it's time to build some stuff. So tomorrow we're actually going to have an Arizona blockathon. You can go to arizonablockathon.us and follow along with that. And we'll have about up to 50 developers get together and start to build some things. And we've had some really cool projects. And we're also working on some workshops, and we've created a new level for participating in the Desert Blockchain community, which is a citizen, a Desert Blockchain citizen. And we're going to be experimenting with a Raspberry Pi device that's sort of like a digital furnace to connect us using things like WebRTC and so forth. And anyway, so that's the mischief that we're up to. And we've got a lot of momentum going here in Arizona. And I'm delighted to be on the VUC and talk with you folks about what we're up to, and okay, also the Decentralized Web Summit.
Exactly. And other than that, I showed the page at desertblockchain.com. Everybody will know how to spell that. We're going to move to James Bodie, who has a eyewitness report in Chicago.
Yes, and here we are live from Chicago. And just to prove it, this is the view from the 35th floor of the Swiss Hotel here in sunny Chicago, where we've had, over the last week, the most incredible ClueCon ever. with so many sort of voice over IP and real-time comms celebrities. But I guess the big story of ClueCon this year has been the launch of SignalWire. So SignalWire is something that's been in the planning for some time. SignalWire is kind of like a cloud-based free switch service. So if you imagine free switch does things not dissimilar to Twilio, that's kind of it, but bigger and better. So lots of excitement over that. But having said that, for me personally, the biggest excitement were, or for me and Andy, were the dangerous demos. And I think we had this year the best ever dangerous demos. And I just have to tell you about the winning entry in dangerous demos this year, which was done by the Fusion PBX team, led by Mark J. What's his surname? Andy, help me. It was Mark. Anyway, Mark
Knight. Mark Knight, isn't it?
No, it isn't Knight. Anyway,
I'll have a look.
Anyway, I saw Mark just before we went on, and I said, "Mark, what are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, James, I'm going to do a configuration of Fusion PBX in 3 minutes." I looked at him and said, "Mark."
Apologies to Mark Crane.
Mark Crane, of course it's Mark Crane. And I looked at him and said, "Mark, don't do that. It's boring." And he went, "Oh, all right then." And we went on, and we had a series of really good and exciting dangerous demos, none of which crashed and burned, I have to say. Not one single one. And we got, and Mark Crane missed his slot. And I thought, well, I think I frightened him and he's run away. But he hadn't run away. What was going on outside was he was running around collecting bits and stealing bits of kit from people's stands and that sort of thing to put together the most incredible demonstration on the fly. What he ended up doing, he borrowed a Raspberry Pi Zero from the bandwidth stand and a power pack from somebody else, and got an SD card from somebody else, and he set up a version of Fusion PBX on this tiny little Raspberry Pi Zero with a battery pack strapped to it. He then wrapped it up in 3 layers of bubble wrap with sellotape, and picked it up whilst it was still rebooting and threw it into the audience. And then for the next a couple of minutes, the audience then proceeded to throw and punch and kick and bat this volleyball of a PBX around the room. And whilst they were doing that, he configured it and placed a call through it. So if you can imagine this, it's the first time I've ever seen an active working PBX bouncing around the room, being kicked by Andy Abramson, and Mike Jarrett's even tried to set it alight. But all the time it was working. It was just absolutely brilliant. So Andy, yeah, you are kind of watching it. Do you want to add to that?
Not really. I mean, it was something of a spectacle to watch. I think you really had to be there to appreciate the full levity of it, though.
Yeah.
And there was one other that particularly caught my attention, which was Seven Do, who was playing with chroma keys, and so he ended up having this green T-shirt with a frightening picture behind it, and the frightening picture was Mr. James Bodie, and I thought that was absolutely brilliant. But there you go, it's just my sense of humour.
So I'm trying to Google furiously for, not furiously, I don't know what the right word is, but desperately something, for pictures of this thing, James. So Andy, or one of you guys who's not going to be speaking in a few minutes, see if you can Google for photos of this event before we move on. Not before we...
There's a bit of video somewhere, because Professor Carol from the IIT, anyway, was videoing this. And she's videoing this ball being bounced around the room, and somebody threw it, and it just missed her by about 2 inches. So there should be a bit of video somewhere of Carol almost being taken with echo.
But with
okay, we'll get off ZipDX and we'll kill the echo.
Yeah, well, Michael, we were just talking about the dangerous demos and how much fun they were.
Yes, and there's definitely video of Mark's PBX Fusion PBX bouncing around the room because I'm sitting on some.
All right, well, we'll find it, but we have to find Carol David's video from her phone where she was almost wiped out by it, which was incredibly funny.
All right, well, we'll try to get to that. Now we're going to move on to our main topic, which is the Distributed Web Summit. And Jay, I'm going to go to the site here real quick and just show it, but while you're talking. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you, Jay. Tell us a little about it while I'm showing some of the pages.
So there are a lot of conferences, and a lot of those conferences are dealing with things like blockchain and cryptocurrency and so forth. But the thing about the Decentralized Web Summit is it goes to a different level, because this decentralization that's happening involves the blending of a lot of different things, including policy, technology, and business models. So this is the second Decentralized Web Summit. The first one happened in 2016, and I attended that along with some other folks from Phoenix. And this, I think, will be even bigger and better. But the core thing to keep in mind is that we are on the brink of a whole new realm where we're moving from centralized constructs, centralized ecosystems to decentralized. And that, in my view, is as revolutionary as things that have happened like freedom of the press, like the internet, like any other thing you can think of, where all of a sudden there's been a whole new shift in the structure of our society and the things that we deal with day in, day out. So I'll leave it at that before we get into some details on the Decentralized Web Summit, and just see if there's any questions at this point before we get into it. The other thing that I would say is, as you've put up here on the screen, Randy, is that we have the people that invented the internet that coming together with the people that are inventing what's next for the internet or after the internet, the decentralized web. So Brewster Kahle up in the upper left, he founded the Internet Archive, which runs the Wayback Machine, which is a snapshot of the internet.
And which we should all donate to, probably, rather than Wikipedia, which I have no love for.
Absolutely. And then if you scroll down a little bit, Randy, you'll see that.
Before I scroll down, Jay, Cory Doctorow is pretty famous, big time sci-fi writer, but also knows a lot about the internet. And I also want to comment real quick as I scroll. There are way more females than you generally would see at these conferences, and I'm really behind this movement. They make up 50% of the population, plus or minus 1 or 2. So they really should be around for this. Now, these are some of the main people. Go ahead, Jay. I interrupted you.
Yeah, I'm glossing over some key people, but you've got Mitchell Baker, who runs Mozilla, and then there's Vince Cerf. Tim Berners-Lee is not even on the top speaker list here, who invented HTTP. And you just got this very, very rich cross-section of people coming together to have conversations and to build things that ushers in this new realm of human connectivity and interaction we're calling the decentralized web. So there also Whit Diffie is going to be there, who public-private key pioneer. It's just a remarkable group of people.
Our Matrix friends, Amandine and Matthew Hodgson, who I invited. He may have not gotten that, or maybe he's traveling. You mentioned that, Jay, that Matthew's taking part. I see Amandine the Pop is on here. She also was a co-founder.
Right.
Take a look.
And then there's we glossed over Juan Bonet, who's the founder of the Interplanetary File System.
Right.
And that, out of this entire ecosystem, my concentration is with the Interplanetary File System, which is a content addressed, decentralized file structure, but it's much more than that. So yeah, as you scroll through this list and you start clicking on the backgrounds of some of these people, it's absolutely amazing, the people that are coming together. And a lot of people haven't even heard of this. It's just sort of grown organically and by word of mouth. And you know, I'm excited to attend again. It was an amazing gathering in June of 2016, and this year, the 2018 session, I think, is going to be equally as amazing.
This is super diverse. By the way, Matthew Hodgson is right on the upper left there, our buddy, who hasn't deigned to join us recently. But they've been real busy. We'll talk about that later too, maybe. Lots of people, as I said, wow, huge diversity. There's a huge number of people speaking. There's a lot of women. There's a lot of people from different nations. This is fantastic. And I have to admit, I try to keep abreast of this stuff. And this is the first time I've heard of it. I probably heard of it vaguely last year if it happened. But what I'm saying is, getting to the organizers, that I was not aware that this was happening next week, nor could I get to San Francisco. So maybe that's why I didn't jump on the opportunity. Wow. What a huge, what an opportunity to meet interesting people. Okay, I'm going to.
Yeah. So the last time we had this was in 2016. And I believe afterwards we had Matthew on, and he mentioned it a bit. Dave from San Francisco was there as well, whose last name escapes me. And anyway, the point is that this is a community that's growing, that's building, and really creating what's next. So everybody that's, you know, I didn't read Andy's post about what Google is missing, but part of the goal is to look at alternatives to the centralization of the internet that's occurred. And, you know, that's the big part of the big opportunity set here. So let me leave it at that and ask if there's other questions. James, Michael, Corrado.
Well, if I can, I have one, Jay, and thank you for asking. I was just chatting online with the other members. We would benefit probably from a layman's explanation of what really the decentralized web is, because normal people listening to this show wouldn't have any idea of any different from, well, let me Google that.
Well, normal people don't generally listen to this show, first of all. But I know what you mean.
I hope they do. But how Google has become the metaphor for internet, how do you find information, has grown organically. It has not been forced literally on anyone. So search engines have become the way people access the web, and it's a funnel. And it gets dangerous because it can be used to redirect people where others want. So the decentralized web is a newly open and left open way to access the web. That how does that work, and what is different between that and the World Wide Web as we know that now?
That's a very good point, Corrado. And before Jay starts, I just want to mention that, hello, Facebook wants to be the internet now. And who knows, maybe Amazon will. Jay, what do you got to say about that?
So if you look over human history, you'll see, or at least in my view, we have relied upon centralized sources of authority over the course of, you know, humanity. Even going back to the tribes, we had a tribal chief, and the chief basically called all the shots. Then we had kings, and we had, you know, dictators and all that sort of thing. So up until this point, I would say up until the mid-90s, when the advent of the internet, or let's say the mass adoption of the internet started, we have been very, very reliant upon governments, upon kings, upon these centralized sources of authority and rule, and not only authority and rule, but also our currency. So the core, one of the core pieces of any kind of sovereignty has been the issuance of currency. Well, then all of a sudden the internet came along, and it opened up a whole new realm of human connectivity and interaction, including free speech. It became much more difficult to, control speech. And then in basically 2008, late 2008, 2009, somebody writes this 9-page paper called Bitcoin, and all of a sudden the decentralization of money starts happening. And when you decentralize money and you decentralize value, and you start to challenge the legacy sovereignties and constructs, the governments and the countries and so forth, with one of their core pieces like money, all of a sudden things start to change rather rapidly. And that is what is happening with this decentralization. To put it in a little more technical terms, we are seeing an opening up of peer-to-peer interaction, technology, and connectivity. And not only is it peer-to-peer with no centralized servers, but it's secured by this thing called cryptography. And that's one of the key elements of what's going on, is the mixing together of peer-to-peer connections, communications, secured by cryptography. And then you throw in this money or value incentives and game theory, and it becomes a very, very interesting mix. So Corrado, does that kind of paint the picture?
Yeah, that's the technical background. But how does the person on the road with a mobile phone access these new decentralized web? How do they find and access the information? That is, how does that decentralized web reaches everyone and everywhere? How do we do that?
So there are things, let's start with wallets, because there are things like Coinbase and blockchain.info where you're able to send money, cryptocurrency, anywhere in the world without somebody having to open an account, or, well, that's not totally true, but in an easier fashion. So if you've got a smartphone, a mobile phone, you don't even need that, actually. I think you can do it with text messaging. So anybody with any kind of, cellular connectivity can interact with this new construct. And it's the first killer application is cryptocurrency. And it's like email was to the internet back in the mid-90s. Everybody started playing around with this thing called email, and they thought, that email was the same thing as the internet. Well, the internet was much more than email. Email is certainly a big thing, and cryptocurrency is certainly a big thing. But the decentralized ecosystem that's evolving is much more than that. And we're just starting to see things that are being introduced that are consumer friendly. So there's a challenger, for instance, to YouTube called BitTube, I think it is, bit.tube. And if you go on that, it looks just like YouTube and so forth. But underneath the hood is something that's decentralized. And I haven't studied it, so I don't know exactly how decentralized it is. But we, to put it into layman's terms, the question would be, what if Facebook went out of business? I mean, they had a $119 billion drop in their market value, yesterday? Well, what if that continued? And what if, in a year or two, all of a sudden Facebook disappears? Well, what happens to all those pictures, all that data that we've all been storing in this thing that's basically a centralized construct called Facebook? So that's one example. So there are people working on something that's like an alternative to Facebook, but it's decentralized. There's, what happens to our health records?
Wait,
every time I go ahead.
no, just to not to put too fine a point on it, people have been working on Facebook substitutes for probably 8 years or something like that. Of course, everybody remembers Diaspora for its lack of adoption, but there's a whole bunch of other things onto to Mastodon or other stuff like that. But I have a question for you, and I wanted to interrupt a while back to ask you about, this is Bitcoin related, actually cryptocurrency related. So recently I wanted to make a donation. I've got, like $90 in Bitcoin someplace. Wanted to make like a $10, $15 donation to someone who accepted Bitcoin. I go to put $10, it's like 18 with the network charge.
Right.
So, that's not going to happen. I mean, I'll just hold that stuff. It goes up, it goes down, and then I'll just take it back because that's not good. So how do we get rid of that? Is it only Bitcoin? Do we go to Ethereum or some other currency, or when is that going to be solved? Because these transactions are just far too expensive. What would your opinion be on that?
Well, so I would say that everything that's out there right now, including Ethereum, is a prototype. So it's, Bitcoin was always touted as, you're going to be able to pay for your coffee with Bitcoin. Well, guess what? That didn't happen.
Yeah, not if the coffee's $2.50 and the network charge is $5.
Right, and it's too slow. And many argue that Ethereum's too slow, and also too expensive to store data on Ethereum as well, is my understanding. So the answer is that all of this is still very much in innovation stage. And the big breakthrough with Bitcoin was this decentralized consensus. So that was what Bitcoin opened up, that other people hadn't been able to do with Paxos and other, consensus mechanisms. Bitcoin was a big innovation in us coming to agreement on in a decentralized way around the world among people that otherwise might hate each other, that actually might be mortal enemies. So that's what Bitcoin is ushered in, and it's based upon this proof of work, which has launched this crazy computational war. That's not going to last. That doesn't work, and you can't be, donating $10 and paying an $18 transfer fee. That's crazy, but it's proven to be an awesome way to store value. So, if you can imagine being a father of a family that's on the shore of the Mediterranean about to get in a boat to try to flee Syria to get to Europe for a new life, what would you rather have? A pocket full of diamonds, a bag full of gold over your shoulder, or a little password that can unlock your Bitcoin? Well, obviously, that's the big use case right now. So the answer to your question, Randy, is that there has to be innovation to take this proof of work consensus mechanism and usher in something else that's, doesn't have this crazy energy consumption and all of that. And people are working on that. Does that make sense?
It does, and I was just checking that the MP3 has nothing to do with what you just said, but checking the MP3 feed, you can listen to us on vuc.me/MP3 as well. I wanted to check to see that was live. Yeah, that answers that question. So interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. This is a huge problem, though. So, the few dollars that I have on Bitcoin, everybody's probably had this experience, by the way. You bought $10. James did this. I did it. You bought $10 of Bitcoin months ago. It's worth 100 now, or whatever. I actually had some trading back and forth experience, but basically probably broke even in the end. But the point is, anyway, at this moment, I've got a little Bitcoin. I think I got rid of all the Ethereum, but the point is, it's worthless to me right now until something happens. So either I can translate it into something new or whatever. So that's the future of that.
Yeah, Randy, one of the topics that came up at KlueCon was what happens to all the value in the currency when people lose their keys. And then we had a show of hands in the room. How many people have bought cryptocurrencies and lost the keys?
Of course we have.
And there were so many hands went up. And so
but you bought the 10 pounds, James, and they were worth $1 million now, but now you lost the key, but you only lost the 10 pounds.
Yeah, but that's not the point, though.
It's a big, James, it would be like having a stack of, euros on your desk and then just lighting them on fire, basically, because they're gone.
Yeah. You make me feel so much better about it. There was a lot of debate about what will happen, and we came to the conclusion with the advance of quantum computing, there will be a stage in the future where it will be possible to recover those keys.
Yeah, someone else will recover your keys, probably, if they're going to use quantum computing. Right?
Well, but you might recover them at, Bitcoin might be worth a nickel then. So
anyway, let's move on. This digression was my fault, but I was very interested in that, and that is a part, presumably, of the conference, the summit. But what else is going on there? And also, Facebook. That's one topic. There's just so much to say about that, and yet we don't want to get into it here now. Google. There's lots of stuff to talk about there with relation to this whole distributed thing, but. The distributed movement, and by the way, Matthew, of course, big time, Matrix, big part of that. One could also say that our friend Emil with Jitsi, that is kind of a part of it too, in that they offer a public instance of their excellent Jitsi meat, but you can also install your own. Wire, right, would be another example of this. What else? What have we not thought of, Jay, that you know of that's going to be happening there? And by the way, you'll have to come back and give us a resume of what happened after.
Sure. Well, let me screen share a little bit here and see if I can point out a few highlights for you. So this, you should be able to see the schedule. And I'm not going to go into the detail on this, but suffice it to say that there's just a ton of different topics ranging from technical to policy to artistic. And you can see all the different, topics up here, community, creative, and you can click on that and basically, fine tune what you want to see. But community, creative, just basically everything. And so
including a good continental breakfast. That's good to see.
Continental breakfast, solidarity, technology, distributed web 101, law and policy. A lot of law and policy involved in this, and you pointed out Cory Doctorow speaking. So it's just a very diverse, rich group of folks that are going to be gathering. You can basically scroll down and see a little bit of information under the About page, what happened in 2016, some pictures of that, and then the mission. You can go over here to the people that you were talking about, Randy, and if you keep scrolling down through all the people that are going to be presenting, you actually get into the individual information of the people that are coming. So as you scroll down and you look through the where these people are at in terms of their day jobs and stuff like that, you have everything from here you got crypto chicks, whatever that is, all the way to just above it this is a Harvard Berkman Center for the Internet and Society regarding, innovation and policy. And you actually have some telecom folks in here as well. There's a fellow from Orange that's going to be attending. And I won't go through and scroll through this, but suffice it to say that it's an incredibly broad cross-section of folks that are going to be gathering. In terms of the actual logistics of it, this is a picture of the Internet Archive, which is actually a church that Brewster Kahle bought because it looked like the logo to the Internet Archive. And this is where the first one was held in 2016. Whoops. And but the majority of it's going to be at the San Francisco Mint in downtown San Francisco. And I haven't been there yet, but it looks pretty cool. So, you know, we've got decentralized information coming together with decentralized value, the Internet of Value, as they're calling it. And, you know, in addition to that, on Thursday night, let's go to this. On Thursday night, we're going to this place, which is called Gray Area. And there's actually a blockchain art exhibit that's happening there. So that's kind of going to be sort of the after conference event. And then on Friday, there's going to be kind of an informal thing at the Internet Archive. So I'll stop screen sharing here. And I don't know, does that give you kind of a sense of what this thing is and what the flavor of it is?
Yeah, it does. Did you say that it was the last one was 2016? So they don't do it every year, apparently.
Right. Yeah, it's, you know, the good news is this is a decentralized community. The bad news is it's a decentralized community.
Right.
Because there's nobody really running the thing other than maybe the Internet Archive.
This sounds great, though. As it happens, I'll be in the States a week later, probably. But if I'm gonna have to watch for this, if I knew about it, I'm sure my wife too would be interested, and we could come through. If there's, was the last one in San Francisco as well? I guess everybody's near there.
Yeah, the last one was exclusively at the Internet Archive, and now they've expanded it into the San Francisco Mint as well as the Internet Archive. But to kind of bring it back to the VUC, many of the things that are explored and talked about here are arguably what's next for the constructs that we've talked about for years on the VUC. You know, like a PBX that's kicked around in an audience, you know, wrapped in bubble wrap and whatever. You can do that. You can create a PBX with some of these decentralized constructs like the interplanetary file system, file storage, global computation. It's not cloud computation, it's actually global computation. That was the breakthrough with Ethereum. And you know, you have people like Chris Matthews, who's working on computes.io, which is like a global world computer. Well, those are the types of projects that these people are working on, in addition to identity. And in my view, identity is the key to the kingdom. And, you know, Randy, you asked, how does this thing scale out so that, you know, when people lose their private keys and stuff like that, the big area for innovation is identity. And I know James has been interested in that as well with SIM cards and so forth. Well, if you scroll down some of the topics, you'll see that addressing through Blockstack and identity, those are key pieces that people are talking about and looking to innovate around. So
let me just throw this out for 1 second. Over to you, Corrado, afterwards. But just I was thinking about this. I just read an article about a guy who is implanting. He implanted a chip in his hand. This is a movement that's going on with certain companies. So you have, I think it's in here that they do this. It's a little tiny RFC thing, and that identifies you. Just forgetting the issue of how they might be cloned and spoofed, let's say. If you were carrying around, even if it's just a fob in your pocket, this is an interesting thing because so you use this with your on any computer or phone that you're using, and you can also use it in the physical world. That actually would be pretty interesting stuff if it can be transmitted online and used at a I was going to say cigarette machine or Coke machine or parking lot. That would actually be pretty good. Corrado, you?
Yeah, I think the easy way of doing it actually is to you have the crypto key material on your phone / SIM card, but then you unlock that using biometric data, be it face,
I don't want
eye, or
link to hardware. It has to be.
Yeah, but I think these embedded RFID chips at the moment are just too simplistic and too easy to spoof at this moment in time. You've got to have something. The interface is not rich enough.
Here, I got the Raspberry Pi in my ear. Corrado, you were going to speak. Go ahead.
No, yeah, sorry. Going back to what Jay said about the good and the bad about the decentralized web, it's both the good and the bad. My concern, and probably the biggest opening that decentralized web offers us, is to create a different type of governance for internet. So where we can capture the profits that are coming out of enterprise on internet, having a proper governance and proper taxation on the enterprise on a decentralized web, instead of the tax dodging that the big companies are doing now, relying on the taxation, different types of taxation around the world, with tax havens and other ways to avoid tax. So it's also a money revenue, but also because of identity, because there's money involved, we need governance and we need a law. And we're going back to circling back to my old age idea that internet should be its own continent.
Right. That's a great point, because that's exactly what we're seeing that's emerging, Corrado, is like a new virtual sovereignty that spans all borders. And that's part of what's being discussed at the Decentralized Web Summit, is how do you create some set of rules and policy and, governance that is global in nature. And yet it still is usable by us as individuals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also important that we allow individuals and businesses and corporate, if they want, and if we want, to work with and on the decentralized web to create profits out of it. So it's self-sustaining. Otherwise, it's something that is run for the pure pleasure on everybody's money.
And that's part of the innovation in the business models, because we've had a lot of people on the VUC that have talked about the difficulty of monetizing open source software. And that's a big problem. And, the direction, at least in my view, is towards open source constructs. So then exactly what you're saying, Corrado, how do you create something that can fuel itself and be self-sustaining? And, that's another sort of sidelight that's part of this conversation. We saw these initial coin offerings and coins and tokens become sort of the fuel, sort of out of the blue. But that's not really like an ongoing revenue stream. That's sort of like an anomaly that happened.
That's a one-off. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a one-off. It happened, but that's probably not repeatable.
Some of this stuff actually resembles pyramid schemes. It really does. I mean, people are opening up ICOs. Michael, you remember? Well, you may not, and I can't remember, probably not good to name them anyway, but yet another podcasting platform, they took months and months and months where I explained to them that you couldn't do HTTPS 127.1.1. Whatever your number is. And then, in other words, it wasn't working for me. It was working for them in their lab. That was 3 months of discussions on why that wasn't working. So they're not clued. Now, I just recently saw ICO. ICO of somebody that incompetent, hello, that is not going to happen. And the multiplicity of ICOs has gotten to the point where, ICO, when I see that, it's like, forget it.
Yeah.
It happen. I'm not going to, I want nothing to do with it.
It got totally out of control and arguably is still totally out of control. There was one construct that was just launched that had raised multi-billions of dollars over a year-long process. They launch it and it doesn't work. So, it's crazy. And I don't think they were trying to scam anybody. It's just that having a huge pile of money for a startup can actually be detrimental. So anyway, that's another show. But just the bottom line is all of this is still very much in its infancy, and it's a radical new realm that shifts us from centralized architectures to decentralized. So anyway, that's any other questions or comments? I don't know where we're at on time. Oh, I guess we got a little more time.
How much computational power do we need to run that decentralized web? Do we have enough computational power in spare cycles in the computers that we end user are using, for example? So where does the computational power to run and the memory space, the allocation, the disk space to keep all that data is in all our spare stuff that we have? We use.
Well, that's one possible solution, and that's coming to agreement via something called proof of work, and people are actually out, firing up power plants in order to do this crazy mining stuff, and I don't think that scales. So, the proof of work, the Bitcoin model, just sort of opened the doors. And now people are looking at, okay, how do we reach this global decentralized consensus without expending all this computing power and energy and all that stuff? So, that's part of what there is to create and develop. I don't think this computational war can continue. So that makes sense, Corrado?
Yeah. My concern is how much power we're using for crypto mining and that stuff. That is probably affecting even climate change if we are going in that direction, because the power needed to do the most simple of computations, the most simple of transactions on the blockchain is expensive. Is expensive in terms of time, money, but also in carbon footprint. Mm-hmm. So it's probably not going in the right direction. We need a different model for a blockchain system that is distributing the computational load in a wider scale. Right. My model was probably the distributed computing that the SETI was doing, SETI, for reading the input from the radars to see the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, that kind of things. So that we have the building blocks, and we have connectivity, we have spare power, both in current, in electrical power and computational power in idle machines that people are keeping at home, including set-top boxes, including Internet of Things devices that using that computational power that is available, distributed throughout to decentralize the web. But there's a lot more work to do. Do you agree?
Oh, I totally agree. And it's, I am confident that there will be new ways to reach this global agreement or global consensus without having to burn all this energy. It's not there just yet. But the other thing to keep in mind, I mean, if for those that are concerned about this energy consumption, there's also a bunch of applications that are looking to use this decentralization of trust and agreement and value in order to create new ways to better manage energy and global warming and the carbon footprint. So the fellow who's the co-organizer of Desert Blockchain is part of a startup that's launching a carbon removal trading platform. So, you know, there are a lot of people in this ecosystem, and if you scroll down that Decentralized Web Summit list, I can guarantee you that a lot of the people that are on that list are concerned about the very issues you're talking about, Corrado, and they are looking to use this new realm as a way to further the carbon removal and, you know, other items of climate concern. Does that make sense?
Yep. I've just seen just yesterday a TED talk about CO2 removal from the atmosphere is just 40 parts per million. So it's really difficult to remove that, but just that concentration is enough to cause climate change. It's enough to cause damage, but it's very difficult to remove because it's so little in the atmosphere we breathe. And the presentation in the talk was showing a really huge wall with fans and a liquid to capture the CO2, and is a very fine balance between all the power needed to move that much amount of air to capture a significant amount of CO2, and the power required to run all that thing, and the carbon footprint of the energy you need to run that thing that might offset the CO2 you're removing from the atmosphere. So you risk generating a loop, but we are diverging from the argument. It's all connected, though. If you see that everything is coming together,
it's all connected.
I would like to go even further outside and mention, since we're talking about this, that I have a feed on Google+, but it's easier to see on Twitter, which is called Save Earth's Oceans. It's at Save My Ocean on Twitter. And it's a curated stream of positive actions. I'm not putting anything in there like, oh my God, we're going to die. We're all going to die in 2 years. This is the stuff that people are doing, concrete actions like dealing with plastics of the oceans and all that. There's no money associated with this, obviously, so I'm permitting myself to drown everybody with these images. But the point is, this is something that you could follow. There are 45,000 people or so following it on Google+ now. It's just a source of energy on how we can save the ocean, because I don't know if everybody knows this, but the ocean is one of the most important things we have, probably as important as air. Millions of millions, hundreds of millions of people depend on it for their lives, and food, and it's a major, major theme. And just to conclude, as far as global warming or climate change or saving the ocean, pollution, overfishing, all of these things, I just want to say one thing. I really get tired of people going, well, it isn't the plastic straws that's going to help. You know what? Everything helps. You have to do, we all have to do what we can do. We get way too much plastics. I buy stuff, it's plastic. I've got to write to these people and say, look, you got to find an alternative way to do this. Point is, don't look at all of this. There are people in the plastics industry that go, well, it's not plastics. It's not really worth doing. This is not true. It's all very biased, vested interest stuff. We need to pull together. And it's the same for the web, for the distributed web. We all need to do what we can. You've got to support these initiatives. We should probably, again, Jay, I said this an hour ago, we should probably all be supporting the Internet Archive, because they seem to be behind. Who's making that noise, James? Is that you?
Not me.
Well, it is indirectly.
Anyway, my diatribe is almost done. Anyway, point is, in everything we do, I'm even going to move this further back to say politics. in whatever country you live in, if you see anything start moving in a direction you don't like, I'm not talking about anything in particular, but we all have to do what we can do. That's all you can do is what you can do. Don't give up. Do it. Do what you got to do. Okay, Jay.
Yeah. So, Randy, I see your comments and things on Twitter and Google Plus and so forth about the oceans, and I know you're passionate about it. And I know that you've cited some things where people are experimenting with blockchain, and I hate to even use the word blockchain, but basically decentralized constructs. Blockchain so 2017, but the point that you're making is that a lot of these things that have come up around the let's call it the abuse of different resources like the ocean have been because we've had these kind of like siloed things where Japanese fishing is under the control of Japanese government, and it's arguably up until this point hasn't been you couldn't influence it from other parts of the world unless you do some sort of big global summit and blah blah blah. Well, now guess what? This decentralized web, and as you scroll through the people that are involved in this, they are equally as passionate about climate change, about conserving resources, protecting the ocean, and other things. And they're looking at ways to use, like a carrot instead of a stick to impact some of these constructs. And that's why you see so many law, governance, and policy topics sprinkled in within the decentralized web. This is a new set of tools to do just that. Where all of a sudden, just like Karada was saying, we have the ability to come together and in a global fashion without having to get the G20 summit, whatever, or United Nations together. We've got a whole new set of tools where we can impact things. So,
yeah, if we crack these internet as a continent or as a nation itself, we can also export that model on the oceans. Where we have territorial waters, but it has really little sense because fish and all the creatures that are living in the sea don't respect any borders, and fishing is not influenced by territorial waters or anything else. So if you deplete in your own waters some species, it's going to affect everywhere else. So the ocean is a shared resource and should be a shared, should have a shared governance from everyone.
Couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. We've kind of come full circle here. Jay, thank you, man. You have brought to my attention and maybe to other people's attention something that I did not connect, which is, there's a million of these conferences. I've been to 20 of them, but this is, first of all, there's a number of speakers around in this one, much more than anything I've been to. These things are expensive, by the way, especially if you're coming from Europe. So, this would be a big, big investment for me if I was going to go, but I would actually like to go. And I think that we should encourage people to go. If I could remember that URL again, but just look up.
It's decentralizedweb.net is the URL. And I believe they will be live streaming all the sessions and they'll be available for recording. There is, Matrix is part of the communications infrastructure. So you can, follow along the chat and whatever, but part of the opportunity is to bring people of like interest together so that they can collaborate, not only among their own communities, but also other communities that have the technical wherewithal to build something. So, again, you'll notice on the headline of the Decentralized Web Summit is, hey, let's build some stuff, working code. We're beyond the point of hand waving. It's time to build some stuff. Does that make sense?
It does, Jay, and thank you so much. I want to thank James Bodie, who's gone, so I'm thanking him posthumously. or whatever.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, whatever the word is. Corrado, thank you for joining us. It's always great to see you. Go out and see the eclipse. I will ping you at eclipse time.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, Andy, you too. You could run out and have a sig there. Hopefully not, actually, but.
Well, stranger things have happened, but we have a couple of hours yet before the eclipse, so
yeah.
3 actually.
Hopefully it's clear skies. I think it's cloudy here, so I'm going to be really disappointed.
Yeah, it's incredibly cloudy here.
A bit cloudy here north too.
Oh,
yeah.
So sad, but there'll be live feeds of that too. Anyway, thanks to everybody who have participated. Oh, Corrado gave me a challenge. I have not written this down, but I will say it anyway. Merci beaucoup de ceux qui ont suivi cela, les francophones, les francophiles et les autres personnes. Ça a été la Visions of Under Construction, les visions en construction, en chantier, on dirait. Ici, Randy Resnick, vous souhaitant une très bonne soirée, bonne éclipse et à très, très bientôt. Au revoir.